Kyle Busch confirms that he will return to RCR in 2025 and will look to run better in 2025. And FedEx is officially leaving Joe Gibbs Racing and NASCAR. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them streams really quickly. We're going to start talking about Zay Smith, as it was reported by Adam Stern earlier today that Zay Smith has been hired by NASCAR as managing director of brand content. Zay Smith, for those who don't know, has been working at Stewart-Haas Racing for many years when it comes to branding for Stewart-Haas Racing on social media. This is a massive pickup for NASCAR in my opinion. She has done an excellent job helping out with social media for Stewart-Haas Racing. Yes, I don't agree with some of the marketing that they've done, but I do think that Zay Smith has done an excellent job over the course of the last couple of years, and from what I know, she apparently played a massive and pretty major role in helping acquire Josh Berry as well. This is a really big deal for her to be working with NASCAR. I think she's going to play a massive role, really helping them going forward. I'm really excited to see what she can do with NASCAR, and hopefully she can help grow and develop NASCAR going forward when it comes to brand content on social media. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Alpine. As it was confirmed earlier today that Alpine will be switching to Mercedes power in 2026. They will start using Mercedes power plant in the 2026 Formula One season. There have been a lot of rumors and speculation over the course of the last couple of weeks that this was going to happen. Alpine, of course, has been having the Renault engine for quite some time, but obviously they have been struggling, though they've had some outside good runs over the course of the last couple of years. They will have some changes going into 2025. Jack Doohan, of course, will be joining the program next year, and they'll have some other new drivers coming into their program in 2025. I think working with the Mercedes power plant next year, though, is going to be massive and huge for that program. And I think that having Mercedes, we've seen Mercedes are expected to be a lot better going forward. And I think kind of moving away from the other power plant of Renault, which could go to Andretti Global if they somehow do end up in Formula One in the future, if it does end up happening. I think going to Mercedes and working with that going forward, I think is really huge for their branding, and I think it's really exciting to see that they're going to be once again working together and having a chance and opportunity to succeed in 2026. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about iRacing. Now, if you saw the tweet last night from Dale Jr., you probably saw that we are talking about NASCAR 25 as they are currently working on the game's soundtrack for 2025 game. And I've seen some very interesting songs that have been brought up. I even saw Breaking Benjamin earlier this evening quote tweet by saying that they would love to see their new song Awaken, which is a really good song, by the way, in the album, in the game. I would love to see some classic songs like Magic Carpet Ride get in there. Maybe Diary of Jane gets into the game. But I would love to see some new songs from the rock scene, even the country scene as well. I think getting songs from people like Morgan Wallen perhaps, and even Luke Combs, and even Post Malone off his new album. If you could find a way to incorporate that, that would be cool. But I also think getting older songs from older NASCAR games and old classic rock songs as well, especially, I think it'd be really huge for the branding of the game. I think that's what they should honestly do. I am really excited for NASCAR 25, though. I think it's going to be a really good game. iRacing's had a really good track record of everything that they've put out over the years. To me, I'm really excited about this. I think it's fantastic and great to see, and I can't wait to see what songs they end up putting into the game. Again, a song that I'd like to see is Awaken by Breaking Benjamin. They're really pushing for. I really hope it ends up happening, because I think that it would be a really good song to be part of the new NASCAR 25 game that is officially coming out later in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brett Griffin. As Brett Griffin confirmed earlier tonight that he will no longer be working with Door Bumper Claire in 2025 and has left effective immediately. Brett Griffin has been with Door Bumper Claire really since the beginning and has been on the show basically from episode 1 up until episode 355, unless he does have to miss for personal reasons. Brett Griffin is a controversial figure when you're on social media. You can definitely see that a lot of people do not like Brett Griffin. But say what you want to say, Brett Griffin does provide his own opinion and doesn't really have a filter. He really doesn't care what he says, and I have a lot of respect for that. Someone that's able to share their opinion on something, and they don't have to complain from a lot of people, even though a lot of people don't agree with some of the things Brett stands for on social media. I do respect Brett Griffin as a co-host. He's brought a lot to the show over the years, and I do think it is a big loss for Door Bumper Clear. Now, it does sound like that Joel Edmonds may or may not be getting involved with the show going forward, which I think that is a decent pickup. I think he's provided some very interesting stuff for the show over the years as well. And I'm very intrigued to see if TJ Majors is going to be sticking around next year as well. But I think it's sad to see that Brett is going away. I know some will disagree, some don't like Brett Griffin, but for me, I have been a fan of Brett Griffin, and I think he has done a solid job as a commentator on Door Bumper Clear. Sad to see that he'll no longer be part of DBC. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Michael Canyon. As it was reported by Racer.com earlier today, that Michael Canyon has officially left AJ Foyt Racing as their lead technical director of the company. This is a massive loss for AJ Foyt Racing. If you don't know who Michael Canyon is, Michael Canyon has been involved in the IndyCar and Champ Car scene for many, many years. He has had success with people like Scott Dixon and even Santino Ferrucci. Santino Ferrucci and Michael Canyon have worked together very, very well, and he provides a lot to the table, and they've worked together for many, many years. To see he's left AJ Foyt Racing is a great shame. Now, I do think that Michael will find somewhere on the paddock to go to, maybe Andretti perhaps, maybe goes over there and maybe works again potentially with Chip Ganassi Racing. That could certainly be a shout and possibility for 2025, but I also do think that there's other areas that he could end up working for in the 2025 IndyCar season, but I think it's a massive loss for AJ Foyt. They are going to have two really solid drivers, Santino Ferrucci and, of course, David Malukas, who joins the program. And I know some don't like Santino Ferrucci and the over-aggressiveness and other things about him as well. But I do think that Santino is a talented driver. And I think having two young drivers who could have in the future end up in the Penske group for IndyCar is really, really huge. But losing Michael Canyon, that is a massive loss for that program. I think there's going to be some struggles coming their way in the future. But I also do think that there could be some success going for both. We'll see how they end up doing, and we'll see if they can perform very, very well without Michael Canyon in 2025. Hopefully they can end up performing next year without him. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ty Majeski. Now, Monday afternoon, Ty Majeski put out a really, really retrospective tweet. Of course, Ty Majeski went on to win the Craftsman Truck Series Championship earlier this past week at Phoenix, winning his first ever championship and getting ThorSport Racing their second straight Truck Series Championship. And he kind of spoke about how he got the opportunity to go over to ThorSport Racing. So in 2020, he was racing for an organization called NASCAR Motorsports, driving the 45 truck, and a few years prior was racing in the RFK Racing Group in that really weird Stage 60 car that they ended up happening. And we saw the struggles for that Stage 60 car, the 60 car they had, which was very, very cursed. And then, of course, he got the opportunity to drive for Nice and had some decent runs, including finishing in the top 5, but was fired from Nice Motorsports because they lost some sponsorship and funding throughout the whole entire year. And then someone, I believe, told him, I believe Chase Briscoe gave him a chance, an opportunity to talk to the owner, or David Pepper, who runs the management over there at ThorSport Racing currently at the moment. They got a call. And the rest is history. He worked on the shop floor. He worked to build that program up. And look what Ty Majeski's been able to do the last 3 years. He's won like 6 or 7 career Craftsman Truck Series races up to this point and got 3 victories this year alone. I think Ty is one of the best drivers that Trucks has had, and I think it's really a feel-good story to see Ty go out and win the championship. While he wasn't the best driver all year, I would still give that honor either to Christian Eckes or Corey Heim, especially Christian with how consistent he was. I think it's still a really amazing and feel-good story, just going from 4 years ago where he didn't even have a job in NASCAR to now having a chance to win a championship. Now, I don't think that championship is going to propel to anything, unfortunately, for Ty Majeski, because I really don't think there's a lot of great rides out there that can be available. But I do think that Ty Majeski's done a lot for ThorSport Racing, and he's been the best ThorSport driver over the course the last couple of years, even better than Ben Rhodes, who won the championship last year, because Ben Rhodes really was never a factor in championship contender on a week-by-week basis. But I do think that Ty Majeski has done a lot for ThorSport, and I think he's done a lot of great things for the ThorSport Racing Group over the last couple of years, and it's good to see him get that chance with the team, because I think he's done a very good job with them in recent years. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rodney Childers. Now, Rodney Childers on Monday basically put out a tweet and basically showed that he was starting to work with Spire Motorsports. Basically, I think standing with TJ Bashire or Jeff Dickerson over at Spire Motorsports, who are the presidents of Spire. We all know that Rodney Childers is beginning his work over at Spire, as he will be the crew chief for Justin Haley in 2025. Rodney Cherchess has done a lot of great things with a lot of great people over the years. He propelled Kevin Harvick to his first ever NASCAR Cup Series championship and won like 38 or 39 races with Kevin Harvick over the course of the last 10 years, quintessentially. He almost helped Josh Ferry get a few wins this past year in the NASCAR Cup Series. Could have won Iowa, could have won New Hampshire, and a few other races early in the season. And then I think about the drivers he's also won with David Rudiman and Brian Vickers. He got those guys a chance and an opportunity. And Rodney Cherchess is such a big asset that I think he is going to provide a lot of great things over to Spire. That is one of the biggest pickups I've seen for that organization. And I truly do believe that Rodney Cherchess is going to do a solid and excellent and a really awesome and fantastic job with this program in 2025. I do believe that you're going to see Spire Motorsports, especially with the rumors that they are going to have more support from Hendrick Motorsports, guys like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, you name it, maybe helping their truck program as well. Same with Kyle Busch, we'll get to in a little bit. I do think that having Rodney Cherchess over there, of course, bringing potentially Matt McCall into the program and having Carson Nosbar get better, I think that's really, really huge. And again, I do really think that Rodney Cherchess is going to bring a lot to the table. I think he's going to help in very massive and really major ways, and I'm excited to see what he can do in 2025. I'm really looking forward to see what he'll be able to do to provide a table, but I do truly believe that you're going to see this program get a lot better next year with the Hendrick support, and I think things are only going to get better and get stronger for that program as they look to continue to improve, which, trust me, I think they truly are going to improve in 2025, and I think Rodney Cherchess is going to be able to provide that where they can get better in the 2025 season. I'm expecting good things from Spire next year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the NASCAR Playoffs. Now, we're going to talk about the updates and potential changes in a video later today, but there's been a lot of talk and conversation. Probably the biggest conversation we have seen on social media in regards this week has been the NASCAR playoff conversation. Now, Joey Logano this past week after he won the NASCAR Cup Series Championship at Phoenix, he basically spoke on the format. He quintessentially called that people saying that his championship is not legitimate is pretty much BS and doesn't agree with that. And he also doesn't agree that we should go back to basically honoring over points and we should quintessentially start doing the same thing and not basically, because if someone clinched the championship 3 weeks early, that's not really a great way to really crown a champion. Then you had Carson Nosbar, who quintessentially was on social media and basically commented under Jeff Gluck's poll on the race and the playoff format. And if you really take a look at these playoff format tweets we've been seeing from a lot of different people, you can see that a lot of people are really fed up and frustrated with the playoff format. And I do want to make this publicly clear. No one should be hating on Joey Logano himself. Joey Logano is not at fault for the playoffs being a major issue. The problem is Joey Logano himself had an awful and terrible season. And really, in my opinion, when you look at his season alone, he doesn't deserve based off his stats. Had a 17.1 average finish. Had 7 top 5s and 13 top 10s. Those are statistically the worst for a champion since 1950 when Bill Rexford won the title. And keep in mind in 1950, Bill Rexford there were less races run in 1950 than there are in 2024, I believe. So really, Joey Logano, despite the fact, yes, he won the right races and he did what he had to do in the system is still very flawed. And I really do believe there have to be major changes going forward for the sport to succeed. And right now, with the current system that they have right now, you cannot have success. The drivers have been critical. You've had drivers like Brad Keselowski, we're going to talk about in a video later today with RFK Racing. There basically is a lot of frustration from the fan base and a lot of fans who really do not like the system. And I think it's justified the outrage and frustration. The fans, again, do not like this current system because it doesn't reward who are the best drivers every year. I think there have to be major changes to this format. I really hope in the future that we could ever get back to the Winston Cup era format, but I really don't think we're ever going to get to that point. So if you're going to have a playoff system, and I'll explain this later this week, you need to do it based off of winning. And I have no issues with winning mattering, but I think you award more points to the winner going forward, then you basically award off of basically just locking your way in. There's really no reason someone should be able to lock their way into the next round of a season or basically next round of a playoffs because basically they end up winning. I think winning you're in is one of the biggest flaws of this system as well. I do think that is one of the biggest issues we have, and I truly do believe we got to see changes to the winning you're in system. I don't think a driver should be able to be guaranteed in to the next round of the playoffs based off the fact they end up winning a race. I think that's really stupid, and that's not a good way to crown a champion. I also think one race to decide a championship really is flawed, and there really is no reason that a one-race championship should be happening. There's too many outside factors, and I also am tired of the comparison to stick and ball sports. Yes, they both have postseason and playoffs, but guess what? They're not all the same thing. We're not the same thing fundamentally, so stop saying that's comparing NASCAR to stick and ball sports. They are not the same thing. Stop comparing NASCAR to the NBA. Stop comparing NASCAR to the NFL. Stop comparing NASCAR to the MLB. They're not the same thing. You have to have fundamental changes to the system going forward, which I'm hoping we can do for 2025 because the frustration and outrage is absolutely justified. Look at some of the polls. I know Jarrett does like a post-race poll basically on his community tab, which is the iceberg, by the way. He basically does a community tab. Usually I see positivity on his community tab. More negativity than I've ever seen. I think he had not 49 or 50% the last time I checked that were negative. That's a problem. The system has to change going forward, and I really hope NASCAR's listening, but it seems like they may be, and hopefully they do listen to try to make things better, because that's what we should be doing, is trying to make the sport much better for the fans involved, because a lot of fans are very frustrated, and I think it's justified why fans are upset with the current system we have, because I think the system that we have right now is not the best way to crown a champion. I really hope it changes going forward, but I'm really worried it's not going to change going forward. Hopefully it does, though, in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Hemric. Now, earlier today, College Racing putting out a tweet thanking Daniel Hemric for all he's been able to do with College Racing since 2022 when he joined the organization after winning the NASCAR Xfinity Series Championship in 2021 with Joe Gibbs Racing in a great photo finish against Austin Cindric. Since joining College Racing, he did make the playoffs, I believe, in all the years he was in Xfinity in 2022 and 2023, but unfortunately failed to win a race. Now, obviously, he will not be back with College Racing in general. Remember, their Cup Series program is officially set for 2025. AJ Allmendinger is moving back up the Cup to drive the number 16, and Ty Dillon will move all the way back from the Truck Series all the way up to the NASCAR Cup Series, where he'll drive the number car as they renumber the 31 car all the way down to the number 10 for 2025. In the Xfinity Series, Josh Williams is back behind the wheel of the number 11 car. Daniel Dye will drive the 10 car next year, and you also will see, of course, the third car being end up driven by another driver named Christian Eckes, who will drive the 16 car and will go for the Rookie of the Year. This means that Daniel Hemric's future is very uncertain at the moment. Now, where could Daniel Hemric end up going in 2025? Well, I think there's a couple realistic options for him going into next year. There's been a lot of chatter that McAnally-Hilgeman Racing could be an option for 2025, maybe behind the wheel of the number 19 truck. Obviously, all McAnally trucks are basically not signed for next year. Daniel Dye's moving up, like I already mentioned. There's also the 43 truck that could certainly be available, but I think McAnally-Hilgeman Racing could be the early favorite for him. There's also Nice Motorsports. I think they've got one truck that's not been announced. They could be running an all-star truck next year, but we don't know at this point. A rotation truck that could end up happening, but I've heard Connor Mosek's been rumored and linked to that organization, so we'll just have to wait and see. Maybe there's some options in the Xfinity Series, but I think those options are closing very, very fast. I think if you're Daniel Hemric, if you want to get a chance and opportunity, you're probably going to be headed back down to the Craftsman Truck Series next year. I think that's basically the only way that he could probably end up doing it at this point, because if he wants to be in the sport long term, especially with sponsorship funding not mattering as much if you're in the Craftsman Truck Series as you are in the NASCAR Cup or the Xfinity Series, you'll be able to find his truck early. He's in the same position as Chandler Smith's in, where Chandler also doesn't have a ride at the moment. And even Eric Almirola, who's also not set currently at the moment for 2025. So I really hope for Daniel Hemric he can find a ride for 2025 and race in the series, because I think while Daniel Hemric hasn't won a lot of races as of recently, I still think Daniel Hemric is a very solid and really, really good driver who has a ton of potential to do great things going forward. So I really would love to see him go down in trucks, be able to be successful, and maybe win a race. He hasn't won a race up to this point. I think it'd be really awesome if he got the chance and opportunity, and we'll see if Daniel Hemric does in fact head over to a team like McAnally, but it seems like he's currently a front runner to potentially head over to a team like McAnally-Hilgeman Racing in 2025. We'll have to wait and see what happens, though, in regards to that. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Zay Smith. Now, it was reported on Monday that Zay Smith and Spire Motorsports and Trackhouse put out a tweet thanking Zay Smith for all the support that they have done over the years and thanking Zay for everything he did this year with the Spire Motorsports group. We already know going into 2025 that Zay Smith will not be returning to Spire Motorsports as they're filled up for 2025 with Michael McDowell joining the team, Justin Haley joining the team, and of course Carson Ospar sticking around for next year. And Trackhouse is fully booked as they will have Ross Chastain in the 1, Daniel Swartz in the 99, and of course Shane Van Gisbergen driving a number 88 car next year. Now, where could Zay Smith be headed next year? Well, he has been heavily linked, and it's no secret that Zay Smith could be headed back to Front Row Motorsports next year. But we'll get to that in just a second. I want to talk about Zay for a minute because of how well he performed from the first half to the second half of the year. The first half of 2024 for Zay Smith was absolutely a major struggle for him. He didn't really have great performances and only had, I think, 1 or 2 top 20s throughout the early portion of the year. You compare that to the second half of this year. In the last 16 or 17 races, and really since I think about Sonoma till the end of the year, outside of a couple races, I think his average finish was under a 20th place. And he had a lot of top 20 finishes, and he had even a couple top 10 finishes, and nearly won at Nashville Super Speedway, as Spire Motorsports has continued to grow. I think if you're an organization and team, you should be really looking to pick up a driver like Zay Smith. I think Zay is one of the most talented drivers that we have currently at the moment, not signed for 2025. Now, like I mentioned a second ago, Zay Smith is very likely going to be headed over to Front Row Motorsports in 2025, or so we think. Remember, currently 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports are currently in a lawsuit with NASCAR, and it was announced earlier this week that NASCAR apparently kind of won away a little bit in the lawsuit, as basically they lost their opportunity to get a preliminary injunction at the time. Now, we do know that it was announced earlier today as well that basically they are planning to appeal, and we're going to talk about that later today as well. But Zay Smith's name has been brought up as a possibility to go to Front Row Motorsports, as they're expected to expand to a 3-car operation in 2025. Zay Smith has worked with Front Row Motorsports in the past and has done a really excellent job with Front Row Motorsports as well. I really think that him going to Front Row would make a lot of sense. Join up with Noah Gragson and Todd Gillen, who I believe Zane is really good friends with both of those drivers. And I think you've got 2 other teammates who I think are really good. Yes, they're going to have a young team, but you're going to have an experienced team as well. Todd Gillen had a breakout year in 2024 and had his best season up to date in pretty much every single category that he's ever had. Noah Gragson early in this year really showed some promise after really just a disastrous 2023 with a lot of things that happened behind the scenes. I do think that he showed a lot of improvement in 2024, and I think going over to a team like Front Row, who is going to get Tier 1 support from Ford, I really think that they're going to get better. And I think Zay Smith going back to Front Row is a no-brainer. Now, obviously, I know that Kevin Harvick basically said that there's no way this is going to happen, especially with the fact that he's got some drivers in his clientele that haven't been signed. Now, there's been rumors about Chandler Smith going over to Front Row as well, but Chandler doesn't have the funding that Zay Smith does. Zane does have a little bit more funding. I do think Zay Smith will end up at Front Row next year, more than likely, because I do think they like Zay Smith a lot. I don't think that they wanted to let him go. They had a difficult choice between McDowell, Todd Gillen, or do you bring Zay Smith into your Cup program? And they got put in a really difficult and really tough position. So I truly do believe that him going to Front Row makes a lot of sense, and I think it will get announced in the future. But again, it all also kind of depends on what happens with the situation with the charters and the lawsuit at the moment. I think that's going to play a major role in what happens there. But like I said, I truly do believe that he should be going over to a team like Front Row. He should be in Cup. I have also heard that McAnally-Hilgeman Racing could be a backup option for 2025 in somehow, some way, shape, or form if he doesn't end up at the Front Row Motorsports group. We also do know that their 2311 is expected to expand next year, with Riley Herbst being that driver. We've also heard they could run a 4th car for Martin Truex Jr. as well. Maybe Corey Heim, Carlos Scribbush could also be possibilities. But I also do think that you're going to see that being an option for 2025. But I really hope Zay Smith ends up at Front Row next year. I think he's done a fantastic and really good job with that program, or in the past won a Truck Series championship with them, and I think him going over to a team like Front Row would make a lot of sense, as I think he brings a lot to the table for that program, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump onto the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about FedEx. Now, we kind of talked about this on the channel this past weekend, but it was shockingly announced this past week that FedEx is not going to be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2025, and they're leaving NASCAR altogether at the end of this year. This is definitely really shocking, but at the same token and same time, it's also not the most surprising thing to see. There are a couple factors to look at when it comes to FedEx leaving NASCAR and Joe Gibbs Racing. Number one, the team has been dropping their sponsorship, and there were rumors about this circulating a couple months ago that FedEx was potentially going to be backing off on how much they were going to sponsor. But they have been also backing off on other things, like they used to sponsor the Commanders Field for the Washington Commanders, which of course were the Washington Redskins not too long ago. But obviously that did not end up coming true at that point where they lost all that funding, which of course is part of the Harris Blitzers group. And now you've got FedEx leaving NASCAR, which after 19 years, they have had a long-term relationship with them. But there's also something else that needs to be looked at when it comes to FedEx. That is the fact that sponsorship dollars have drawn up for FedEx, and they also have lost a lot of money. From what I know, FedEx has been really struggling. They're losing a lot of money, and they've been planning to cut around $4 billion, I believe, at least, to try to keep the doors open for their program. And I do think that having them back off a little bit, it kind of unfortunately makes sense. I don't really think this is fully the same thing as like losing Home Depot, Burger King, Lowe's, other companies like Target, basically other companies like Subway and Dunkin' Donuts, and even other companies that have worked in NASCAR in the past, like Red Bull, especially though they're kind of involved in the sport, working with Connor Zilisch and Shane Van Gisbergen. But I also think it's a massive loss for NASCAR to lose a company like FedEx. And we've been seeing other companies leave, like Geico, in recent years. So losing a company like FedEx, I think, is super unfortunate to see. But now the big question that comes around is, what does this mean for Joe Gibbs Racing and Denny Hamlin? Well, it is a lot of sponsorship that they will lose. They're going to lose a lot of money, especially from FedEx, as FedEx was providing a lot of money over to Joe Gibbs Racing. So that's a lot of loss for Denny Hamlin. The good news is Denny Hamlin does have some backup sponsors going into 2025. Mavis Truck Center is coming into play and sponsor Denny Hamlin, I believe, a lot more over the course of the last couple of years. They will probably sponsor Denny Hamlin in more races in 2025. I also think that Campbell's, who announced a major branding ship with the Harris Blitzer Group and Joe Gibbs Racing for 2025, I think that they're going to sponsor Denny Hamlin for quite a few races. I do think that Goldfish will get involved in some way, shape, or form, and some of the other companies that are part of the Campbell's brand will end up working with that program next year, probably also with Chris Bell and Ty Gibbs and even Chase Briscoe, who will join the team next year. But could this mean anything for Denny Hamlin? This could definitely mean something. Denny Hamlin's future at Joe Gibbs Racing after 2025, I believe, is a little murky, as I do believe, and I might be wrong in this, but I believe that Denny Hamlin only signed a contract extension last year up until the end of 2025. And at that point, Denny Hamlin may end up retiring from NASCAR and fully working with 23XI Racing, because Denny Hamlin, like I said, is going to be 45 years old at the end of next year. And at some point, the performance that Denny Hamlin has had is unfortunately going to end up fading, and it's going to basically drop off quite a bit. I do think that you're going to see Denny Hamlin either retire at the end of 2025 or come back in 2026, or may just leave Joe Gibbs Racing altogether and go race for his own organization, maybe full-time. That could certainly be a possibility. But I truly do believe that you're going to see this kind of affect them. And it's kind of also, like I said, a shame to see a company like FedEx, who's been around for such a long time in the sport, it is a shame to see them leaving and seeing all these big names and brands and sponsors leaving. And we're not getting a lot of those big sponsors back, which is disappointing, though we do have companies like McDonald's sticking around in the Jordan brand with Michael Jordan. I do think it's good that they are sticking around. But I really do believe that it's a shame to see a company like FedEx end up leaving. But I do think, like I said, it is a much different situation with FedEx than it is with other brands. And I don't think it's the same thing going on as what we've seen with other brands like Home Depot and Subway and other companies as well. To me, it's sad to see a company like FedEx going away, but also at the same tokens and same time, nothing really shocks me anymore, right? We're seeing a lot of major companies leave. We're seeing major sponsors leave. And until I think the sport gets better, I think you are going to see a lot more of these big companies and big brands end up leaving. I do think there's a lot of people that are definitely frustrated with the way things are going. And I do think there's some sponsors and companies that have been frustrated with TV, among other things, that have really affected their decisions to stick around in the sport. So while I am disappointed to see this news, I'm not majorly shocked and surprised to see it but it also at the same time, the same token, it is really disappointing to see a big company like FedEx no longer working in NASCAR going forward and only going to be focusing basically on trying to keep FedEx open going forward into the future. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, Kyle Busch yesterday put out a reflection tweet in regards to a very frustrating 2024. But he says that they're hoping to bounce back at the organization he's currently driving for, which is Richard Cherchess Racing, and has confirmed that he'll be back with Richard Cherchess Racing in 2025 driving a number 8 car. I also do want to correct something here. I had reported on this channel that Derek Nealon would be retiring. That is not the case. Derek Nealon did confirm yesterday morning that basically that he will be sticking around to continue spotting for Kyle. He just retired for basically the off season, so I will apologize and correct myself on that. But he'll be back to spot for Kyle Busch in 2025. Now, this is something that we kind of talked about on the channel earlier this year around June. Around the Iowa weekend, there have been some really big growing talks and conversations that Kyle Busch could leave Richard Cherchess Racing at the end of this year, and there have been some talk about him going to Spire Motorsports or even going back to Joe Gibbs Racing or Hendrick Motorsports. We go back to all the rumors inside these organizations and teams, beginning with Spire Motorsports. We already knew that Corey LaJoie would not be back with Spire Motorsports for 2025, and many people were speculating that Kyle Busch, with how frustrated and how pissed off he was starting to get with RCR, I do think that he was looking to go to Spire, considering he does have a current working relationship with Spire Motorsports in the Craftsman Truck Series, really trying to build up that brand and that organization in the Truck Series and make it this successful team, which they have been very, very successful over the course of the last couple of years. Some thought he might head over to Spire in the Cup Series, but obviously that did not end up being the case, and he did end up, of course, staying with the team, and of course, basically, we saw Justin Haley get the promotion for the program. Then Hendrick Motorsports. Many people were speculating that Kyle could end up in the number 48 car for 2025, as there was rumors circulating throughout the summer that Alex Bowman could lose his seat at Hendrick Motorsports, as some thought he wasn't performing as high as Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, or William Byron. Luckily, Bowman got to stick around, and he performed so well throughout the playoffs this year, and I think he's done an excellent job with the team. The other team, Joe Gibbs Racing. This is very early in the summer, and many thought had Mark Truex Jr. ended up retiring. Some had thought that maybe Kyle Busch would reunite. The problem is Kyle Busch does not have as much funding as he used to, like he did at Joe Gibbs Racing. Remember, he had M&M sponsor him for a ton of races and for a majority of the year, but they were dropping back their sponsorship over time, and of course they left at the end of 2022. So then the best option came into play. What do you have on the table? You've got RCR. Now, obviously, RCR, there's been some rumors that they've been getting help from a Joe Gibbs Racing engineer, and they've been having a lot of new people come into that program. But the big thing to watch for is Kyle Busch is probably going to be the biggest free agent going into 2026. Kyle Busch is going to be in a contract year in 2025. And I do think there's some organizations and teams that are probably going to be looking at him that don't have drivers signed past this year. 2311 is one of those teams. Riley Herbst could end up being a free agent. If he does go there and ends up struggling with 2311 Racing, I could definitely see Kyle Busch being a potential replacement. There have been some talk by a couple different people that he could end up at 2311, and when originally all the RCR stuff and sweepstakes for Kyle Busch came around, many were thinking because Kurt was over there working at 2311 that he could find a way over at that program. I think Hendrick could be an option, but probably not at this point. And then RFK Racing, because they're going to be expanding to a 3-car operation next year. That's been pretty much confirmed at this point, though not announced. I do believe that he could end up at a team like RFK because Brad really likes Kyle. And I do think there's some other organizations that could end up working with Kyle Busch. But I do think 2026, the most likely option could be Spire Motorsports. I already talked about this on the channel. But Spire Motorsports is a team and a program that is really beginning to grow massively. And especially with Kyle Busch working with Spire for as long as he's worked with them for the last couple years, really helping and growing that program, I certainly would have to think and imagine after KBM was purchased by Spire Motorsports, I'd have to think that there is a potential chance and possibility that we could see Kyle Busch over at a team like Spire Motorsports. Now, if Kyle Busch does end up performing massively in 2025 and has a bounce back year with the talent Kyle Busch has, I do think that is certainly a possibility. Then we could see Kyle Busch stick around in 2026. Kyle Busch is not getting any younger. But I do think he will bounce back a little bit in 2025, where I do think he'll make the playoffs, and I do believe that he will end up winning at least a race or two next year. I do think that RCR will slowly get better. But let's say that doesn't end up happening, and they do truly end up struggling. Well, I really don't know what this means for Kyle Busch going forward if he does decide to leave. The problem is there aren't going to be as many free agents available. Now, Trackhouse could definitely be an option if Ross Chastain really struggles, because Ross, I do believe, is in a contract year, but also Daniel Suarez is also another driver that's in a contract year with that team. So I do believe that if Daniel Suarez struggles and Kyle Busch is available, he'll have to go up against Connor Zilisch for the seat. And luckily for Connor, I think that he will be someone that could be in Cup in the near future. So I think for Kyle Busch at this particular point, you're going to have to figure out what you're going to do next year, because definitely is a little bit of questions right now what Kyle Busch will be doing for 2026. But as of right now, Kyle Busch is going to stick around for 2025, which I think makes a lot of sense, right? Kyle Busch has done a lot of great things over at RCR over the course of the last couple of years. I just think they need to make some upgrades. There's been rumors about Greg Zipadelli going over there and helping them up. So I think that certainly could be a possibility. So we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens in regards to the future for Kyle Busch past this year and next year as well. But Kyle Busch, as of now, will stick with RCR, but he will be in a contract year. And I certainly would have to imagine, and I would think this would be the thing to watch for, is that Kyle Busch could officially end up being a free agent at the end of 2025 and could end up being a potential candidate for a really good team in 2026, as there are some good free agents that could end up being out of rides, and Kyle Busch could end up being in one of these really good rides for 26, So we'll see what happens in regards to that. But Kyle Busch's future is definitely right now set for 2025, but also it's a little bit uncertain past this year. Hopefully we can see him stick around for a long time and really help RCR grow, but I don't know if that's fully going to happen at this point. We'll see if they can step up and run a lot better and see if RCR can get better so they don't lose Kyle Busch going forward, because that certainly could be a possibility for 2026 if they do end up struggling. So that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think Kyle Busch will leave RCR after 2025? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all those stories talked about today on the channel, including FedEx leaving NASCAR? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later this morning on the channel, see another NASCAR news video. We're going to talk about RFK racing a little bit. We're going to talk about the playoff potential changing and the 2011 and front row lawsuit. Talk about other drivers like Haley Dean, Carl Shane, and Gisbergen, and Kurt Busch, and all those people. And then on Thursday, we're going to have basically rankings of every single NASCAR Cup Series race from 2024. Just the points paying races, by the way. Then on Friday, we should have a NASCAR news video. If not, you're probably going to see maybe a small little silly season update, but it's going to be more one of those videos that's a lot shorter and just goes into some of the things that have not been announced yet for 2025. And you expect some team preview videos that are going to be dropping really soon here as we do get into the second week of the off season coming up. We've got a Formula One race happening really soon as well, by the way. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.